Hi everybody, and thanks for tuning in to this Leland in the Kitchen episode. This is episode number 3, where we are going to be making an apple pie. So, first thing when you make an apple pie is to make the crust. We'll be making 2 crust apple pie, so we need some butter, usually cold butter, some flour, and a little bit of water. It's not much, not that many ingredients. So we have 2 sticks of butter, which is a whole cup, and we just put it in a big bowl, and we're going to mix it with one of these things. It's called a pastry cutter. It's basically just a bunch of wires, and you go up and down to make it mixed without using a fork or one of those other kinds of mixing things. Somehow that makes it tough, I guess. Okay, so there's the butter. There's the flour. So 2 2/3 cup of flour. I use whole wheat flour. So 1, 2. You can see I'm not too precise about all this. 1/3 and 1/3. Okay, so we don't do the water yet. So we just get the butter and the flour mixed up before we add any water. So right now we're just cutting into the butter, trying to get it to be as easy to mix as we can get it. Get it in little pieces, and then you can really start to do the mixing. So I tend to do it up against the wall here. So I push against the side rather than the bottom. That way I can kind of just go all the way around while I'm doing it. But whatever works for you. Tends to get stuck in all this stuff. Butter's pretty sticky stuff. So I'm constantly getting it unstuck. So we do this for a while until it seems like it's kind of mixed, and I will show you what I think mixed looks like. The recipe book. So this is straight out of Betty Crocker recipe, except they use shortening instead of butter. But I think butter is better. Mostly because shortening is partially hydrogened vegetable oil, which is known to not be too good for us. So I use the butter. The butter's known not to be too good for us either, but in a different way. So I take the lesser of 2 evils. So eventually, when the butter is mixed, you shouldn't really be able to tell that there's butter in here. Right now, you can see all kinds of all kinds of little pieces of butter. Right? You should be able to see that once it's all mixed. So we'll just keep turning it, mixing it, turning it, mixing it until it's pretty good. See, this takes a little while. You could use an automatic mixer, I suppose. They are made for doing this, but I like doing it myself. So again, you do whatever works for you. The mixing part, it's not critical that you do it by hand, so as long as it's mixed well, it doesn't matter how it got there. So right now I have a bunch of little bits of butter, and I still have a lot of flour that's very dry looking. So I need to keep going until there isn't any dry looking flour, and I can't really see any little bits of butter. And it takes a little while, kind of doing this for, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes or so. So it's important to have good crust on your apple pie. We once tried other kinds of crusts that might be a little easier, and well, they weren't as good as this. So spend the time to do it right and make a good crust. It has a lot to do with how good the final apple pie is when you have it. So one of the other things I do with apple pie is I have homemade ice cream to go with it. I won't be showing you how to do homemade ice cream today, but I use Ben & Jerry's ice cream book or something like that. So the recipe they have for French vanilla ice cream is really good. It's pretty simple. Just mix some eggs and cream, milk, sugar, and of course vanilla, and then mix it in whatever, put it in your ice cream freezer thingy. Mine takes like 20 minutes, and then you put it in the refrigerator for overnight, and then it's ready to eat. So I did that yesterday, and so that ice cream is ready to go, and that's why I'm making an apple pie today. So this is kind of in celebration of the beginning of the fall 2024 semester here at the University of Michigan. That's where I teach, and we've had the first week of classes already. Things aren't going too bad yet, so the students aren't too busy, and the professors are not going too crazy trying to keep ahead of things like me. And we've got very nice weather. So now we're getting to the point where this is looking pretty good. So if you take a look at this, you can see it kind of holds its shape now, and it's pretty well mixed. So now we can add the water. Now the Betty Crocker recipe says 78 tablespoons. I say 6. I don't really know why. I just tried it and I thought it worked better. So it's up to you what you want to do. So I'll slowly add. I usually do 2 at a time. 2 tablespoons at a time. Mix it up a bit. And add another 2 tablespoons. Okay, so we're up to 4. And it's good to, just kind of take a look at what it looks like. Is it getting all kind of wet and easy easy to turn into a dough or not. So it's definitely getting there. Much bigger chunks of dough with that water in there. And I'll add 2 more tablespoons. 2. It's getting to the point where it's kind of hard to mix in. But I think 6 is a good number. If you have too little, your dough kind of breaks apart when you try to roll it into a nice thin crust. So too much, and I feel like it isn't crust-like enough once it's baked. It's more kind of tough. So I came up with 6 instead of 7 or 8. And that's okay, right? I mean, this is kind of winging it. Right? We tweaked the recipe. We're using whole wheat flour instead of white flour, and we're using butter instead of shortening. And so we expect to have to make some kind of changes to make it work with those different ingredients. Okay, so now just kind of manhandle it, roll it into kind of a ball, and you can divide it in half right now, or you can wait until later. But it's pretty much about ready to turn into a crust for our pie here. So I'm just gonna leave it like this and go to the next step. So the next step is dealing with the apples, right? So the idea, so choose any apple you really like. These are Granny Smiths, but you can use any apple that you really like to make this. The only difference really is that you may have to adjust the time, and you can do that based on how well it's cooking. So that's something I'll talk about towards the end. But so for now, we have a bunch of apples. We would like to cut them up into smaller pieces that will get done in a reasonable amount of time. So I usually have 2 bowls, one for the apples, one for the peelings and things like that, and of course a cutting board so I can do everything. I like to cut with a small knife, so this is like a kind of a small knife. Other people like to use big knives. Whatever works for you. So I will tend to cut it in quarters first. So I'll cut it in half like that, and then in half again, and right through the center of the apple, so that so you can see the core right there. So the first thing I do is I get rid of the core. Just two cuts like that, and then I peel away the outer peel with the knife, and I try to, you try to be neat, and you try to only get the peel and not too much apple. You get too much apple, eventually you might need more apples because you're kind of using up the apple with the peel. So I have about 7 of these getting ready to make this. So fiddle. It's supposed to be like 9 cups according to the recipe, but whatever works for you again. So you can kind of get used to how big the apple should be, how many, it's just approximate. So it's no big deal. I've made this with Macintosh before because I like Macintosh plain, but I've noticed that it really, it doesn't make a heck of a lot of difference, at least from what I've seen, between Granny Smith and Macintosh for making this. So try it, see what makes sense for you. There's all kinds of different apples available at the store, and you may have your favorites. So if you can't find Granny Smith, whatever you can find, just try it and see how it goes. It all comes down to making sure it's done at the end, right? You don't want to be crunching apples while you're eating your apple pie. So you want it to be kind of squishy, and there's a way to make sure that it's squishy before you take it out of the oven. Oh yeah, so one thing I forgot to mention. So depending on your oven, it's probably a good idea to get it started right now so that it's ready when you are. So preheating your oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit right now is a good idea. So I'm going to go do that. Be right back. Okay, so that's started. Now I tend to take these quarters and I leave them on the cutting board, and I'll do all the rest, and then I'll come back and I'll cut these into smaller pieces. So for now I'm just going to show you how to do it with this one, and then I'll come back after I'm all done and show you what it looks like. So right now what I do is I take that and I cut it into 3 long pieces that way, and then I go the other direction and I cut it into smaller pieces across that. So my pieces tend to be about this size here, right? Like maybe what size of a pineapple, if you get it cut up at the store. So depending on how big your apple is, you may want to cut it into 4 elongated strips and then a whole bunch along the other direction. It all comes down to the size of your apple and how hard your apple is. If it's a really hard apple, you need to cut it into smaller pieces, otherwise it won't get done in a reasonable amount of time. And what you'll end up doing is you'll end up burning the crust in order to get the apples to be cooked. So that's kind of an annoyance. So 3 or 4 lengthwise slices and maybe 5 or 6 in the other direction, and you'll end up with reasonable sized pieces of apple. And you just keep doing that till all the apples are done, and I'll do that off camera, and when I'm done I'll be back. Okay, we're back. So we have cut all the apples, and we've got quite a big bowl of little small pieces of apples here. So the next step is to add some stuff to the apples to make a nice filling. So that involves sugar. So a cup of sugar. I use organic sugar. I'm not too fond of white sugar. Many of you probably know. Then a teaspoon of nutmeg. Kind of sprinkle it all over the place. And a teaspoon of cinnamon. Low on cinnamon. so we want to mix that up a bit, so you could use a fork. So you can use a fork to mix all this up. So get all the, oh, did I forget something? I did, I forgot something. We need to use also a third cup of flour. So, of course, in my case, any flour is whole wheat flour. So this helps thicken it up once it gets hot enough. Okay, so flour, sugar, and spices. Mix that all up. I tend to go from the side and lift up from the bottom to mix it. The other way you might end up squishing the apples a bit, and it really doesn't get you anywhere because it all gets kind of stuck at the bottom. So a lot of the stuff is at the bottom, and you want to bring it to the top to get it mixed in. And it's a good idea to do this earlier than later because this helps keep the apples from turning brown from oxidation with the air. Okay, so now we have it all mixed up. We're going to put that aside, and we're going to roll out the crust and put it in a pie plate. So I'm making a 10-inch pie, so I have a pie plate here, and I have a piece of wax paper. So I'm going to take my dough ball, I'm going to cut it in half, so I use half for the bottom, half for the top. Remember, this is a 2-crust pie. Okay, put this aside and turn this into a ball again, and then we're going to roll it out with a rolling pin. So let me show you. So we have this piece of wax paper, and we made it so that it's approximately the same size as our pie plate here. So that now we take this, put it on there, use our rolling pin, and we will make it go all the way to the edges of our wax paper. So that will be approximately the kind of size we need in order to fill this. So we go kind of slowly. I tend not to use the handles. I tend to use the rolling pin itself. And let's see. I'm going to try to get the camera to be a little bit better here. Okay, so there we are with the dough. And we're going to try to do it nice and slow. The edges will tend to, so sometimes the edges will tend to crack like this, and that's what the water is for, so that doesn't happen. I use a little less water so that the crust is a little flakier when it's done and when we're eating it. And so I tend to have to repair the edges while I'm doing this in order to make that work. So I'll go back and forth kind of at different angles, try to keep the shape of this kind of circular, because that's the shape of the pie plate. And so now it's probably a good time to, so I hold the top of the crust and I push it in from the side like this. If I have any cracks, and I just go around the edges doing that to keep it from being too screwed up around the edges, because this will be a problem if you leave it. And it's easy enough to do right now. So you do that. So you're kind of pushing from the top, pushing from the side. And now you don't have any cracked edges. So you keep making it thinner and thinner. Again, constantly switching directions to keep it sort of circular. And if it gets out of hand and some place isn't really getting what it needs, you can go diagonal, whatever you need to do to kind of keep it circular as best you can. Not, don't go too crazy, but sort of, kind of, right? And we're getting there, right? It's still not near the edges, but we're getting there. And kind of do it slowly. Push as hard as is needed without going and making a big mess, because if you push too hard, it'll stick to the rolling pin and it'll break, and generally you're going to have to start over if you do that. So push gently, as much as is needed in order to get it to roll out a little bit more each time. And just keep doing that, and you'll see that it's slowly getting to be the right size without getting too screwed up in terms of shape. And just do it diagonally as needed, and keep going. You want it all the way to the edges if you did your wax paper the right size. So it should be just slightly bigger than the pie plate you're doing, because since this is the bottom crust, it's going to have to go up the edges, right? It's not just going to go along the bottom. The bottom crust goes along the bottom and up the edges, and so you need it to make sure that it goes a reasonable distance up the edges. Otherwise it won't contain all the liquid, and the liquid will squeeze out and kind of make a mess of things. So you definitely don't want that to happen. So if it doesn't go all the way up to the edges once you put it in the pie plate, you need to make it go up all the way to the edges. That is critical, or things will be kind of messy after it's baked, and that will not be a good thing. Okay, so I think this is reasonable now. So it goes nearly to the edges, as you can see, and it's very much sticking to this this wax paper, which is really good because it helps keep it from falling apart. So now we take the pie plate and we just kind of hold it over there, and we take a look at it and get a vague idea if we think it's going to work, and I think it will. So we put the pie plate right next to it, and we just quickly flip it onto the pie plate. Reposition as needed to kind of center it, and then slowly, carefully, gently let the middle drop in to the pie plate. And now carefully take off the wax paper bit by bit, inch by inch, around the edges first, trying not to rip anything as you take it off, nor not ripping the crust in particular. Okay, so we've removed our wax paper, and this is what things look like right now. We need to push it into place, make it make it touch the glass, in this case the glass, the pie plate, everywhere. We don't want to have any bubbles or holes. And we just tap it into place very gently, because otherwise you'll break it. And you just go around bit by bit. Usually it needs it right around the edges right here, more than anything else, and then along the sides as well. And now at this point you've got crust sticking up around the sides, and hopefully you don't have any places where it's too bad, like maybe right here it's a little too low. I don't know if you can see that, but it's much lower there compared to the rest of it. So perhaps I might take a piece from somewhere else and add it to that little spot right there, so that we have a little bit more crust, so that we're sure it's not going to squeeze out and cause trouble. Okay, so for the rest of this, just leave it the way it is. It's okay until we add stuff in and add the top. We're just gonna leave that crust hanging out, and we'll deal with it later. Okay, so now we go and we get the filling. So the filling, we already did the mixing. Mix it up one more time maybe, and then we can take that and just dump it in. Okay, that's all we got to do. Dump it in, and if it's too tall, whatever that means, right? If it goes over the top, we probably want to try to bash it in there a little bit. Use your fork and kind of work at it, squish it in there wherever you can do it. So first, you get it all relatively spread out, and in our case it looks pretty good. It's kind of going right to the top. This will vary every time you do it, because the number and size of your apples is not something you can control very easily, and so just kind of squish it down there, make it nice and neat, so that it's kind of a uniformly packed in here. That looks pretty good. So you can see how that's uniformly packed, kind of all the same height. Don't want to have it too crazy, because otherwise some stuff will get done sooner than others. Okay, great. Put that aside, and we will now work on the top crust. So top crust is basically the exact same thing as the bottom crust. We're just going to take our dough, make it into a nice ball. The more spherical, the better, because it'll be getting turned into a circle. So we do the same thing that we did before, being very gentle and trying to keep it circularly shaped as we slowly squish it out into something that is relatively thin and covers the entire piece of wax paper. Now, if you don't have wax paper, you don't want to get wax paper, you probably do this on a floured surface. That's the standard way of doing these things. But then at that point you're going to have to constantly be looking around to see if it's the right size. So you get your pie plate and you compare. Alright, so I'm going to get rid of these edge cracks again. So pushing from the side with my fingers and pushing from the top with my fingers to kind of turn it into something reasonably solid instead of cracked along those those parts where it started cracking. Again, this is because I didn't put in as much water as I should, whatever that means, but I think it comes out better this way. And it's a small price to pay for better pie at the end. Okay, so away we go. Smooth it out again. And remember, go kind of slowly, because if you watch as you do it, you can see that you're kind of squishing the dough out between the countertop and the rolling pin. And if you do that too fast, it's just going to break. So you do it kind of slowly. Even kind of sticks sometimes, so you have to get it off there without breaking it again. And if you had more water, it's even stickier. So kind of figure it out as you go, how much you have to do and what you can get away with. So as you can see, we're getting there. It's kind of square at the moment, which is not good, so I'm going to try to make it a little more round by going diagonal now instead of just those other two directions I was doing before. And slowly make it bigger and bigger. A lot of people who aren't used to whole wheat hate it, right? So you can do this with white flour if you want, but I highly recommend you get used to whole wheat, because not only is it better for you, but I think it tastes better in the long run once you get used to it. A lot of people, they're used to things the way they are, and it's not necessarily the best. It could be better. So try new things. See what you think. Okay, so that's a good size, more or less to the edges. So I think we can do the next step. So the next step is to add it to the top of our pie. So here's our pie with the filling, and here's our top crust. So again, just like before, we put it right next to each other, and we take the top crust and we put it over on top. Kind of rearrange it to be centered as best we can. Now in this case, we pull off the so we pull off the wax paper, and now we take the top crust edge and the bottom crust edge, and we kind of roll them and squish them together. Okay, very gently, because otherwise you'll make a big mess. In some places maybe it won't be as easy. Some places you'll have too much, some places you'll have too little. Do what you can. Now the one thing that you end up doing with this is you can make it like a really narrow top like this if you pinch it with your fingers, and that's going to burn. So always pat those down gently so that they're at least 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch thick, so that they're not going to burn. So you go around making all these pinch together. Don't worry about how it looks yet. Just pinch them all together, one by one, as you go. So as you can see, I'm slowly getting it pinched together. So there's a little bit too much right here. A whole lot hanging right there. So I'm gonna remove some, because otherwise it's gonna be a big mess at the end. And then I'm gonna pinch that together. Okay, so I've got that pinched together. Now I can go around and make it pretty. So very common thing. So what I do is I'll take my finger and my thumb, and I will just kind of twist it like that, and I end up with making it scallopy like that. See how scallopy that is? So that's all I do. Forefinger and thumb, and I just go around, and it's not too important. It's one of those little details. So if you want to do it, go ahead. If you don't want to do it, I highly recommend you just go around and make sure that there aren't any too thin pieces of crust that will get burnt. And make sure you pat those down so that they're not too thin. And away you go. We're almost there. So we've got the crust with the scalloped edges. So like that. And last but not least, take the fork we mixed stuff with and just cut a few gashes in the top, like this. This is to let air out while it's going to be steaming. Just cut a few, it doesn't really matter. And now you're ready to put it in the oven. So I'll be back once it's out of the oven. Okay, hi again. So it's been 50 minutes and we have taken the pie out of the oven, and as you can see, it's a little too bright, but see that stuff right there? That's some of the goop from the inside leaking out. That's a good sign that it's done. We can put our no, that's just too much light, right? We can put our fork in one of these slits that we made and see if it meets any resistance, which it does not. So from that we decide that it's actually done. And so here it is. Pie is all done and ready to cool and then eat when it's cool enough. So thanks everybody, and see you next time on Leland in the Kitchen. Bye bye.